Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would answer a question this is a question that I get fairly often. I actually got it again this morning on my private Facebook page from someone who is on my friends list. And this is something I see pop up pretty often. I used to get it in PMs all the time. I still see it on the fan page wall. I see it in video comments. I would say I get asked this question at least once a week. And I have been getting this question for a long time. In fact, I've been getting this question for years. I used to get this question when I may have been involved with manufacturing and distribution of some of these substances pretty regularly, years ago. So it's a really common question. And for those who've never considered the question, it's going to sound really, really absurd. But I want to set the absurdity of it aside and try to treat it like a real question because it's so common. And that question is, it's generally worded as something along the lines of, is it possible or is it a good idea for someone who just wants a shortcut to reach their drug-free or natural limits to use some steroids to get there quicker and then just come off the steroids and maintain their natural limit? And I know that sounds absurd. Use drugs to reach your drug-free limit. It sounds really absurd, and I agree it's absurd, but I think it's absurd for reasons other than what a lot of people think, because I don't really care about the difference between drug-free and natural. I think it's a bullshit definition. Nobody out there should care if other people use gear or not. It's fucking irrelevant. But let's take the question seriously for a minute. When you look at statistics, and this is stuff I've linked off, say, McDonald's page, because he put together multiple articles and studies on this, and it compiled them together at one time discussing drug-free limits. And it's generally agreed by most experts that for a lean bodybuilder, not even a strength athlete, but a bodybuilder who is lean, meaning 10% or lower body fat, that a fat-free mass index seems to be the upper limit of those with really, really good genetics. So we generally define a lean, when you're lean, having a fat-free mass index of 25 pretty well caps you out. And you can find calculators all over the internet, including calculators on natural bodybuilding sites for that, which state that. And I know a lot of you guys are going to plug people in who claim to be natural and go, wait, they got a 26, 27, 28? Well, there you go. You busted them. It's better than a drug test. Because the experts generally agree there that only people with good genetics hit 25. And in those same studies, they found that the majority of steroid users, the average steroid user, had a fat-free mass index of between 24 up to about 24 and a half. So, that being said, the average steroid user who is still currently using is below the natural limits. So, people who think that they're just going to get a shortcut and reach their natural limit in one cycle, well, those statistics disagree with you. The next problem that people reach is this false idea that you keep all of your gains on these drugs. And their idea is that, well, if you go up to your natural limit and you come off, you'll keep the gains because you're still where you could have been naturally. But it doesn't work that way with anabolics. A lot of the growth that you get off of a given drug, unless you introduce another drug to maintain an abnormally high level of muscle protein synthesis above normal, you actually lose most of the gains over time. Even if you didn't pass your natural limit. You see this all the time. You'll see guys who blast up to a fat-free mass index of 24, come off of gear and lose muscle. Well, these are guys who could have gained another 5 or 6 pounds of muscle drug-free had they given it long enough. They were still well below their natural limit, but they come off, they do PCT, they lose some of the gains. Now, do you keep some of the gains? Of course. And if you stay on for many years, you will change set points, you'll make changes in tissue hyperplasia, nuclear cell count, all these things. If you stay on a really, really long time, a few years, you can maintain above your natural limit. And I had found that out years ago when I got sick. I came off for 3 years straight, and I carried a fat-free mass index higher than what I should have had. Okay, it was just above 25, but I hadn't touched any drugs for 3 years. So I maintained some of it, but I lost a lot of it. I mean, I lost a couple inches off my arms. I lost 80 pounds off my bench press. I certainly didn't keep all of my gains. But the same thing happens to guys who don't get that big or that strong. They still lose a lot of it. And so what I generally see happen is, this is a question that tons of guys go into. I've seen dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of young men over the years in my lifetime who have made this statement, and they say, I'm just going to do 1 or 2 cycles and I'm just going to keep most of the gains and I'm going to come off. Well, let me explain how that works. Nobody does that. Almost every single guy who you've ever met who's been using steroids for 5 years straight That's what he said when he took that first shot. When he did that first test and debulk stack, that is what he went into it saying, I'm going to do 1 or 2 cycles, I'm going to come off. Or you meet lots of guys who say, yeah, I used to do steroids. You look at them, they don't even lift. Hey, I did steroids for a little while, and then you find out, and because I've seen this happen, how that ends up happening, I've watched this happen at least 9 or 10 times. I've seen guys who go, they do 1 blast or 2 blasts, they do their PCT, they come off, they get depressed, and they realize that they don't want to stay on steroids lifelong. They don't want to train without the steroids, because once you have experienced a substance like that, the recovery, the drive in the gym, the work capacity, the ability to train for longer, recover faster, and feel like you didn't even train the next day, no DOMs, no soreness from a workout that might have buried you before, just all of the fringe benefits around your training that people get from it, they don't ever want to train natural again. You train for 12 weeks straight on anabolics and you go back to training without them, it will never be the same for you again. You're not going to enjoy your training or feel that you're getting the same thing out of it again. And so it can become a psychological addiction there. And a lot of guys go, well, since I don't want to stay on them and I don't like training without them, I'll just quit training. And that's why you meet so many guys, if you chat with people who really don't work out anymore, who say, yeah, I've done a couple cycles of steroids. That's why. They quit training when they cycled off. They just quit. And then the other guys who started and they go on and they realize that they want to make that lifelong commitment and stay on. So at the end of the day, the person who actually tries to do what these people are describing is almost non-existent, because they fail and they go into one of those other 2 categories. They probably exist, and I'm going to have 2 or 3 people who are going to come up in the comments and say they've done it, but for the majority of people that doesn't happen. It's really a ridiculous question. It's silly, and it's one that people need to reassess and step back and go, they need to realize that if they try that, odds are they're going to end up in one of those other 2 groups. They're not going to do what their plan is, because they get on the gear and the gear doesn't work or feel the way that they thought it was going to. It doesn't work out the way that they thought it was going to when they went into it. And accordingly, they end up in one of those 2 groups. So if you're one of those people who's asking that question or thinking about that, you need to ask yourself, which of those 2 groups are you going to be comfortable going into? Because you're going to be in one of those groups if you do this. You're going to be in the group of guys who say, screw this, I'm staying on, I'm either blasting and cruising for the next 5 or 10 years, or I'm at least doing 2 or 3 cycles a year for the next 5 or 10 years, maybe for the rest of my life. Or you're going to be that guy who just gives up and quits training because he doesn't ever want to train natural again, but he doesn't want to do more cycles. And they ultimately just throw in the towel. So you need to realize that you're going to end up in one of those 2 groups. So before you take that plunge, think about it ahead of time, which of those 2 groups you would rather end up in, because that's where you're going to end up once you do a serious cycle or blast. So let's end this bullshit silly question. All right, guys, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. But let me give you guys a bicep shot before I go. Oh.